Westminster rarely lacks for political theatre. But today, or rather last night, there's a political row between Lee Anderson, Reform's first elected MP, and the party's former deputy, Ben Habib. And what started as an accusation of plagiarism has quickly escalated into a bitter public spat, illustrating the deep fractures between Reform as it struggles to maintain cohesion and as it wobbles heavily in the spotlight. Anderson, the Ashfield MP, with the point of view of the working class, recently posted a laundry list of Labour Party failures on social media, insisting that Sir Keir Starmer's government would never have been elected if the public had been told the truth. And while his supporters lapped it up, an eagle-eyed observer, or a few eagle-eyed observers, noticed something peculiar. An identical tweet had been posted weeks before by another user. And Ben Habib, who seized on the moment to publicly question Anderson's integrity, says, does Reform UK endorse plagiarism? And things go from bad to worse. So much for integrity. And Anderson, never one to back down from a fight, dismissed the accusation outright. He claimed a friend had sent him the tweet, and rather than acknowledge any wrongdoing, doubled down on branding Habib a pathetic little man, engaged in a smear campaign. Shut up, Anderson raged. You're boring. You need to go and see someone. Well, I'm afraid the reality is that Anderson has in fact copied somebody else's text. At first glance, this may seem like an amusing yet trivial social media spat, but in reality it reflects a deeper malaise within Reform UK. Since being removed from his deputy leadership role, Habib has been on the warpath, regularly criticising his former colleagues, including Anderson and Nigel Farage, and more recently he accused Farage of lurching to the left, which, given Farage's track record, is a rather bold claim. Reform UK was always a party held together by a shared opposition to the political establishment rather than a coherent governing philosophy. And the question now is whether its internal contradictions will prove fatal as it gathers more supporters. Is the more supporters it gets, the more mainstream it has to become, and the less it becomes a voice for naysaying. In the end, it has to actually say something rather than say what it doesn't want. And Anderson is an ex-conservative working class populist, while Habib is a millionaire former city figure who sees Reform as a vehicle for radical economic libertarianism. And these tensions are boiling over. Anderson's troubles are not just internal. His fall from grace in the Conservative Party was triggered by controversial remarks about the London Mayor Sadiq Khan, in which he'd claimed that Khan had fallen under the control of Islamists. And this led to accusations of Islamophobia, a backlash from across the political spectrum, and ultimately to his move to Reform UK. And Habib, interestingly, agrees with Anderson's broader critique of Khan, but believes his language was clumsy and counterproductive. In a statement that was as scathing as it was strategic, Habib argued that Anderson had allowed Khan to wrap himself in the false cloak of an injured minority, thereby handing him an easy political victory. Habib's view is that Khan is not controlled by Islamists, but is in fact an independent actor pushing a diversive agenda. And Habib places the blame squarely on the legal framework underpinning diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, policies, which he claims have given Khan cover for promoting a political agenda that is prejudiced against Britain's white majority. In his eyes, Anderson should have directed his fire at the legal framework rather than making inflammatory accusations that were easily dismissed. In fact, Anderson was simply copying Tommy Robinson. We come back down to the sort of plagiarism issue. Reform's recent electoral success, winning 5 seats, including Anderson's, should have been a cause for celebration. Instead, the party is already showing signs of strain. Anderson remains the most recognisable face of the party, other than Farage, in Parliament, but his combative style and tendency to provoke controversy may prove as much a liability as an asset. and Tice is clearly is emerging as the person who can structure the best sort of arguments. Meanwhile, Habib, now on the outside looking in, seems determined to stoke internal conflict rather than mend fences. And Farage, as ever, looms large. His decision to return to frontline politics ahead of the general election was meant to inject credibility into the party, but he has a long history of walking away from when things become politically inconvenient. And if the party continues to implode, will he stay the course, or will he leave Anderson and company to their fate to squabble independently? Because at the moment, not only has he been silent about, or was he silent for a few days about the Oval Office debacle, but he's now been silent about the Habib Anderson stuff. At its core, the Anderson-Habib row is not just the petty personal spat, it's a symptom of reform's growing pains. The party is trying to appeal to disaffected Tories, Brexiteers, populist voters, but it lacks a unified vision beyond opposition to the status quo. And Anderson's brash style and willingness to engage in high-profile opposition, high-profile feuds, plays well with a certain audience and plays well with the former reform agendum, but it doesn't set the scene for what reform could be, should it actually have greater success, or should it achieve some sort of power. It risks alienating others who want reform to be a serious alternative to main parties. With Anderson and Habib at each other's throats, and Farage's, Farage's future in doubt, because Farage again has demonstrated yesterday on the Nick Ferrari show that he doesn't really have his finger on the pulse of anything other than opposition, and he waits to work out what he can say about his mate Trump that's not going to get him into trouble. That's not somebody who's leading political debate. That's somebody who's responding. And that's not somebody who's going to be a major figure in the future. That's someone on his way out. So, Farage's long-term commitment, Farage's long-term future in doubt. Reform faces a fundamental question. Can it mature into a credible political force, or will it tear itself apart before it gets the chance?